The aches in my back were like no back pain I had had before. I dragged myself out of bed on Shabbat morning, nursed my sore throat and dry cough with a cup of tea. I davened and then listlessly watched my daughters playing a card game in the living room. By 10 a.m., it was back to bed for just a little nap. Turned out to be the first of 3 naps that day, which sounds like a really luxurious Shabbat. But by the 3rd one, I was worried. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I didn't tell Jill that I wasn't feeling well. I told myself it was probably just my body releasing the stress of the last 3 days. Terrible days in March between Purim and Shabbat, when the Shul's board and I stayed up late, deciding to suspend in-person services, writing a long message to the congregation, hastily designing our first online Kabbalat Shabbat. But what if it wasn't just stress and exhaustion? What if the virus was here in me? Jill was coughing too, and our girls had had a runny nose for days. What if my illness was just beginning? Standing there over the bathroom sink, my mind wandered forward in time. I envisioned myself in the hospital. I envisioned my funeral. I imagined what would happen to my family without me. In the words of Unetaneh Tokef, Emet ki ata hu yotzram, ve'ata yodea yitzram, ki hem basar v'dam. True, you are their creator, and you know their form, that they are flesh and blood. A human's beginning is from dust, and their end is in dust. Risking their life to get bread, a human being is like a vessel that breaks, like grass that withers, like a flower that fades, like a shadow that passes, like a cloud that vanishes, like a wind that blows, like dust that disperses, and like a dream that dissolves. 2020 has forced us to confront anew the possibility of our own death. Not only our mortality, but the fragility of our lives while we live. And not only our fragility, but also our ephemerality, how soon we might die, how little a trace we leave as the world moves on. We don't know how much time we have, and the impression we make upon the world is not indelible. Yes, the consequences of our presences will go on in the endless rippling outward of each action and interaction, the unforeseen unfolding of each cause and effect. Yes, but even 3 generations from now, how many of us will be personally remembered? So the great paradox of a Jewish approach to what Heschel called the inconceivable surprise of living is how to battle fiercely for life while at the same time making peace with the reality of death. If we cling so tightly to life that we deny death as a natural part of life, then we wrench ourselves out of alignment with a holy way of living. But so too, if we become so accepting and so blasé about death that we fail to fight for each precious moment of each precious life, then we slip toward passivity, even complicity, in the presence of suicide and murder, God forbid. And so we fight to live while making room for the possibility of death. Now we often locate the climax of Unetaneh Tokef at that famous line, right? Tzedakah, tefillah, tshuva, avert the harshness of the decree. And the Machzor layouts really encourage that with the big, bold print. Okay, and that may be the climax. If we think that the central dilemma is how to avoid or endure suffering and death. But maybe the broader dilemma is how to live. In which case, we can see the climax of the poem much closer to the end. The author of Unetaneh Tokef comes to terms with our limitations, not just by listing the ways in which we die, but by contrasting them with God's infinity. Ein kitzva lishnotecha. There is no end to your years, and there is no limit to the length of your days. Immeasurable are the chariots of angels who glorify you, and there is no way to describe your imperceptible name. Your name is fitting for you, and you are worthy of your name. And then comes the line, which suddenly collapses the vast chasm between us and God. Ushmeinu karata bishmecha. But our name you have called by your name. Act for the sake of your name. Sanctify your name through those who sanctify your name. Those who dwell on high, together with those who dwell on earth, proclaim the threefold sanctification in your sanctuary, the Kedusha. We are named with the name of God, Yisrael, those who wrestle with God. And it was one of us, that first lump of clay, Adam, who named God Adonai in the first place, according to a midrash. Like Adam, we are animated by the divine breath of life that enters through our nostrils and courses through this flesh and blood. It is we who sanctify God's name through the actions of our bodies, our dust and clay. It is we who make God's presence manifest in this world of dust and clay. We emerge from the eternal divine unity into this differentiated life. We push and pull and rise and fall, and then dissolve back into that which is greater than us and from which we came. Coming to terms with our finitude is really the precondition for transcending it. Our fragility and ephemerality are the necessary boundaries to make a container for a life lived with purpose, meaning, and urgency. In the words of a poem by Rabbi Suzanne Offit, the harshest decree is not dying without breath. The harshest decree is not living with breath. So we are left to ask ourselves, what is the breath that animates our life? And what will we do with the breath that we have left? In the words of Psalm 119, Ger anochi va'aretz, al taster mimeni mitzvotecha. I am a sojourner in this world. Do not hide your mitzvot from me. The commentator Radak elaborates. He says, this means we are like sojourners in this world, in that we will depart from it, because we have no real status or enduring existence here. Therefore, God, do not hide your mitzvot from me, because I do not know when I will be leaving. In other words, show me what to do and how to live, and don't let me miss a single opportunity. If the pandemic has taught us something, not only about death, but about life, it's yet another paradox. It's enough to do mitzvot, to live a life of service to God and other people. It's not just enough, it's a lot. It's maybe everything. If if they can say at our funeral that we were noach lashamayim v'noach labriot, pleasing to God and pleasing to other people, in the language of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, then ma tov chelkenu, how good is our portion? And at the same time, we do have choices about how we fulfill that service, how we make the most of our talents and our skills, our heart and soul in every waking hour. So if this pandemic has shaken our assumptions, or changed our plans, or caused us to reconsider our path, if we find ourselves unsatisfied or awakened by a holy restlessness about our life or our world, then let's take the opportunity to live into our mission with all we've got. That renewal, that realignment, that return, which collapses the chasm between us and God, between our best selves and us, is what we call tshuva. So yeah, it was a frightening Shabbat, that first Shabbat of not being together at FTJC. But when I woke up Sunday morning, I felt entirely better. No pain, no cough, no fever. Jill took antibiotics in case she had a sinus infection. Everyone cleared up. Maybe it really had been stress. Maybe it was nothing. Only weeks later, we did get antibody tests, and we awaited the results. Positive exposure to the virus. Maybe it really had been COVID-19 after all. But did that make us lucky or unlucky? Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it meant everything. Had anything changed? Gemar Chatima Tova.